Okay, Evie, over to you as the person who seems to have instigated this whole process and got us here together. Tell us a bit more about why are we doing road mapping now?
Yeah, hi, thank you everyone. It's really nice to see you actually all. I wasn't expecting anybody to join, so I'm so chuffed. um, so this roadmap, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Evie Petavradzi. I work for the British Geological Survey. A lot of the work I do is on metals and very much on critical metals. And for the last few years, we've got a lot of obviously focus on the electrification of transport. So this whole road mapping exercise is very close to my heart and the kind of research I do. The key reason why we decided to go for this road mapping is because we know that our transport systems are kind of transforming, and the transformation is happening quite fast. The time and targets that have been put out by our government are getting shorter and shorter by the day. We're now looking to 2030 for all new cars to be electric, which is 10 years away only. And obviously materials are very fundamental to this transformation. You know, we'll need more materials to fit into this new fleet, and we know we'll need different materials to do that. And materials supply is not always without problems. You know, there are a lot of obstacles and bottlenecks that we have to overcome for certain material types, critical metals being one of them, and so for other materials. There are also different obstacles and bottlenecks. At the same time, there are a lot of how can I say, circumstances wherein, you know, we're going through Brexit, we've got a lot of trade restrictions happening across the globe. So material supply is not, you know, going to be straightforward. And with that in mind, and the fact that the UK actually relies an awful lot on materials coming from overseas to us, the circular economy has a huge role to play, you know, and to make sure, though, that materials from the circular economy become available to us, we have to develop strategies around that. And we have to make strategies that are very much fit for purpose for transportation systems. So this roadmap exercise is actually attempting to define what the role of the circular economy, the future material needs for transport are going to be.
And who are you going to be sharing this roadmap with? What's the end goal for the roadmap? Right.
The roadmap is obviously of interest to everyone who deals with transport and transportation systems. I mean, we are all coming from research institutes at the moment, so we do have a lot of interest of sharing something that could kind of instigate new research ideas, new research projects. But we also work very closely with government, so we would like to be a roadmap that will address some of the questions that policymakers and government is trying to answer. We work closely with industry, so we would like to produce something that possibly industry can use as well in their future strategic plans. But also, you know, the society itself and the decisions that us as public make about transport and how we would like transport to be in the future. So I think it's very wide, you know, the scope of this roadmap, really.
And this road mapping exercise, this is just going to be focused on material, specifically on materials. What about the other topics that we might be doing? Are there plans to do other roadmaps on those in the future?
There are plans for another 3 roadmaps, if I'm correct, Rika, right? I mean, we haven't focused the themes yet. We have some overarching themes that they fall across our research activities and tasks. But this one is very specific on materials. So we had a survey going on to try and kind of gather some information interest from different communities, and I think we'll be sharing some of these results later on today.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things. I mean, the other thing that we're hoping to learn from that process is all the stuff that we don't know. As I said, a lot of us, like, we either focus on a specific transport system or we have our favorite materials. But, you know, transportation systems and vehicles are complex things. They include a lot of different materials. And I'm sure there are a lot of bottlenecks and challenges that we're not aware of. So if we have to think about the circular economy, we have to think about how we prioritize material streams, components, and which way we go to address this.
So some of your hopes for this is it's going to flush out some of those potential bottlenecks, bring a bit more of a sense of the whole picture into this, a more holistic overview of it.
Absolutely. I mean, we want to bring definitely more holistic view. As I said, the consultation process that we've gone through has been quite an eye-opener. We had such a wide response of different priorities and different challenges and things that people are doing to address some of these. We kind of try to narrow this down now to 4 different topics. So the kind of topics we're going to include are very much about material supply, and the requirements for materials from the circular economy, understanding better what the demands for these materials be, addressing some of the social challenges and how the society looks at transport up to 2050. And looking very closely at supply chains as well, and how do we need to incorporate circular economy into supply chains. So I think these are the kind of 4 areas that relate to materials that we picked up from the survey responses.
I'm doing work in around systems theory and the circular economy, and you're referring to materials, obviously, because that's the main theme. I was just wondering whether any concepts such as cradle to cradle, for example, or has been considered as a framework, perhaps, which sits outside of that in order to take that holistic view, because it's, you know, like it's dealing with materials as an asset as opposed to as a pass-through element, which then gets, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the cradle to cradle is very, very important. I hope that when we start talking about, especially the requirements for materials, the environmental footprint, let's say, of materials, you know, will also be discussed, because really a lot of the constraints to supply is not actually getting just the material, is the environmental footprint of these materials that they come with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And equally with the social side of things, you know, like people now want to have responsible supply. If you're not able to provide this, you might fail. So again, your supply might be constrained because you cannot responsibly supply materials, you know, for transport.
Yeah.
So yeah, very much so.
Okay.
Thanks for that. I'm just going to pass over now. We talked, Evie mentioned about the survey, and it was the survey which helped come up with these 4 topics that we're going to focus down on into the roadmap. I'm going to hand over to Rika, because Rika's done a lot of work with the survey content, and I'm also going to share with you we're going to be using a digital tool called Mural for the workshops, and I'm going to be just sharing with you now the mural area that we've prepared for you as a kind of preparation, bit of a coffee lounge area. And the first thing you're going to see in this is, I'm hoping you can see my screen now. Yeah, perfect. I'm using
having difficulty reading the detail.
Don't worry, Jeff, don't worry. When you actually go into it, you'll be able to zone in. But this is the overview of what it looks like when you arrive in there. And this area here with the multiple post-it notes, this is your piece of work, Rika. So you've spent yes, I know. She's done an amazing job with this. The rest of us looked at the survey and went, oh, where do we start? And Rika's actually the one who's kind of put it into shape and made some sense of it. So Rika, do you just want to talk us through briefly what you worked on here, so that people can, because you'll be able to then have a look, Jeff, at in more detail afterwards.
Sure. So with the survey, we've had about 40 responses, and the questions in the survey, and you can see they're color coded here, where we were trying to gather from different perspectives what priorities was question 1, what people considered to be challenges was question 2, and 3, any interesting developments. and that was going to be in pink. So if you look at the mural board, which I apologize for the messiness, what I've tried to do is
creativity. We never call it mess.
It's to collate all the answers and cluster them based on broad research areas. But there's a caveat there that this is what I thought could work, and I would be grateful for anyone who wants to have a look. And if you disagree with the clustering, feel free to move things around. You can also comment on the responses to say if you agree or if you want to add anything. So as I said, it's color coded, yellow, blue, and pink. So if you just wanted to look at priorities, you would look at yellow, just looking at challenges in blue, and then anything in pink might make an interesting reading list. So people have posted any documents, consultations, links that they think are interesting. So yes, please, this is a living document. Feel free to help me make it more accurate.
And we will be sending you in the email afterwards, we will send you a guide to how to use Mural. But I think we forgot to tell you how to add a comment. But if you do want to add a comment, you can see that I am now just highlighting this post-it note here. And I can then use my right hand click. Oh, there we go. Add a comment. And then obviously I have no particular intellectual contribution towards this apart from a general hurrah, but then you can add a comment. Someone else can then go in, they can see your comment there, they can add a reply to your comment. So it's quite easy to kind of get involved and interrelate the content on this. So we would welcome this. You won't mess it up because we have another copy of this. So if you kind of manage to delete the whole thing, we will curse you mildly, and then we'll just go and get the copy and stick it back on again. So really don't worry, have a good play with it. But that's basically how that works. So thank you very much, Rika, for helping us get started with that. That brings us, so what we're going to send you in Rika's email, you're going to get access to this mural here. This is like we've called it our coffee lounge, because we want it to be the bit that you would have had in London. We may have had all of this content somewhere on a wall somewhere. The coffee, you'd have gone in, you'd have picked up your name badge. So all of this area here is that coffee lounge area. So you can see here, you've got these empty blue circles are your name badge. So the first thing you might want to do is to write on your name badge. And then you'll see the 4 choices of our workshop, the 4 themes that we're going to cover in the workshops are here. So material systems, material requirements is in purple. The role of the circular economy is in green. Material supply chains is in blue, and social trends is in orange. And so you can have a read of that, and then once you've written your name on your post-it note, you just move it to the theme that you're most interested in exploring in the workshop. Or if you're quite open to any, just move it to the grey table for neutrality. And there's also post-it notes around, so you can also add a little bit more detail about yourself on there. The same as you would in a coffee lounge, it's just a little chat thing. It's the nearest we can get to any kind of interaction pre-workshop. So that's available for you there. You'll also find an amazing range of pasties. And I'll just invite you now just to have a little look at our virtual pasties, and you can choose in the chat which one you want, because we did this earlier as a team. Obviously preparing for this session, we thought long and hard about which was our preferences. I think, Rika, you were going for the kind of palmier shaped one. Richard was going, we think, for the one at the top, this one here, but we then warned him that that might put too much dust on his blue shirt. So feel free to, you know, also just comment on the pastries. We do want this process. It's like live, these workshops are serious, but we also have to have a little bit of lightheartedness in this as well. So engage with that. So we're going to send you the link to that, and it will give you a little guide. I've done a short video which just tells you how to use Mural. Really, really easy. You don't have to have an account. you'll go in as, if you don't have an account, you'll go in as an anonymous animal. And the choice of animal is completely arbitrary and has nothing to do with your personality or anything. So that's the coffee lounge area. That's the pre-workshop. I'm going to pass on to my colleague Richard, who's going to just talk you through, once we get into the workshop, the process that we're going to be using in the workshop. Again, we're going to be using Mural in the workshop. So that's why we would really like you in this week to just have a play with the Mural here, so that you're familiar with how Mural works, and that will make you feel more able to interact in the workshop. So it just makes it, we find that the Mural really helps in the workshop, make it feel a bit more, less like just talking to each other and more being able to capture information. So Richard, do you want to share us the process for the workshop and just talk us through briefly about the workshop?
Absolutely. Thanks, Christine. Hi, everybody. Well, you've probably gathered that our style is engaging and participative, and you've already made a contribution by doing the survey, which has helped Evie frame the topics. So the workshops will be similar in style, built around breakout groups where we can maximize your input and get your ideas. And I can see there's stuff in the chat already from those people who want to make sure their contributions don't get missed, which is great. And the workshops essentially be built around breakout groups, with Christine doing a bit of entertaining and traffic control in between to direct the sessions. It's going to be a mural. Let me show you what the actual framework is going to look like once we get to the workshops. So hopefully you'll see a share coming up with some green stuff. So this is the basic process that we're going to follow to help deliver Evie some sort of firm direction around what a future roadmap should contain. So in this left-hand space here, what we've got are our building blocks. In the workshops, we're going to take a bit of time just to check in on the future vision for each of the topics. And in this example, we're talking about the role of the circular economy. And by the time we get to the workshop, there'll be a bit of pre-population from the survey to help stimulate some ideas, but you'll be free to add at that point. Having done that, oh, don't move the arrows, Richard. Having done that, we're going to go down and check out where we are currently. So down here, that gives us just a chance to know where we're jumping off from and assess the distance that we have to travel. And then in the first part of the workshop, we're then going to go and again use Rika's survey work, but also your ideas to look at some enablers. Over here, what's going to help us move nearer to the vision, and over here, what are some challenges. So the early part of the workshop is really about getting a grounding in where are we and where are we going to. Once we start to do that, some of the serious challenges will start to drop out here. We're going to do a bit of prioritization. And so around the challenges for circular economy, for example, we've got things like operating models, technology, supplier network. And in the second part of the workshop, we're going to strip out the most important of those and spend some time in this deep diving area. So take each of the big challenges or indeed opportunities and actually say, well, what does that mean for us? What kind of solutions, what kind of issues will that throw up when we really do a deep dive, for example, here around operating models? So maybe it'll touch on government policy, maybe there's some financial and non-financial incentives, maybe there's a bit of something that might look like a bit like market mapping to figure out what that might look like. So that's the second big chunk of work. And that discussion will then allow us to do this, to move across to the third part of the frame and start to say, for each of those, through a bit of deep dive discussion, have we started to throw up actions in different timeframes that start to move us towards the vision that we looked at in the first part? So it's a stepwise process, looking at where we want to go, deep diving on the challenges and enablers to start thinking about solutions, and then starting to frame all those solutions into a roadmap timeline. So that's the overall process. And if I zoom out, you're going to be able to see that for each of the 4 topics in the workshop, there'll be a specific work area. So 4 topics, 4 areas, same process. I guess the final thing is we've got 3 workshops following each other on this, so they're going to follow one after the other. It's probably realistic that in the first workshop there's a bit more time around framing the vision and the current challenges and enablers, where we are, and progressing through into that sort of deep dive area. Might be in the first workshop we don't necessarily get to some big conclusions on the roadmap, but the great thing is that as workshop 2 and 3 follow along, a lot of that work's already been done, and the emphasis will shift into later in the process, so that by the end of workshop 3, Evie and the team have got some really solid stuff to go out. Final point, you won't be alone, because in each of the topic areas you'll have one of the PIs from the Sense team cajoling, encouraging, guiding, prompting, rescuing, whatever is needed to help you through the process. So you'll get lots of help on the way.
Thank you very much, Richard. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview. But once the workshop ends, and we will pass the stuff over to the next workshop, and the next workshop will pick up where we've left off, add some more stuff. And we intend that over the course of the 3 workshops, we start to expand and to fill these the 4 topics, and then potentially we are estimating 3 to 4 subtopics for each of those topics. So by the end of this, we hope that we maybe have about 12 to 16 subtopics fleshed out with a bit more detail. Then we will summarize that, capture that, make sure we've got a written record of it, pass that over to Evie and the team, and they will then bring that together into a final report, which will get sent out to you, which will realistically be probably in January, unless they spend lockdown Christmas just writing reports, which would be very, very sad. So that's the plan. Good question from Mark about milestones. Should we have milestones in 2030, 2040, milestones in 2030 and 2040? We've gone for, Richard, remind me, we've gone for milestones in 26, 36, and they're quite arbitrary.
Yeah, so the framing doesn't sort of follow along with the decades. The intention was that to achieve something in 2050, you're probably going to want to start at about 2038 to get there. But actually, as you go along, if time is critical, then you can attach a date to your sticky and tell us what.
Yeah, I mean the only reason I put 2030 is obviously if the ban of ICE engines comes in at 2030, that's clearly a major shift in technology between now and 2030, but also that will drive new technology from 2030 to 2040 and so on and so forth. So I was just thinking it might be useful to map out any proposed legislative changes or any proposed technology introductions and use those as sort of stepping stones to a sort of 2050 vision. But I will be 90 in 2050, so my contribution then will probably be limited, whether I'd rather focus on what I can do in the next decade.
Yeah,
I think that's a good point. I think there are a lot of targets, not just the UK one, but a lot of the projections and targets out there are for 2030 and then 2040, 2050. So maybe we need to kind of have the milestones for its decade.
Yeah,
that was kind of what I meant. So, it doesn't have to be 2030 specific, but if we put down all of the key targets and milestones, and when we can see how our overall framework fits inside of that, because clearly coming up with a new biofuel when we're going to ban internal combustion engines seems a bit pointless, so it's about matching relevance. Now it may be that we do change our strategy on biofuel and hydrogen and stuff like that relative to internal combustion engines, but that needs to be done within a technology framework.
Great. Okay, no, good
This-
points, and we'd definitely be flexible. Can I bring in Dan? Can I bring in Dan, because he was using
Yeah,
the
just-
beautiful raised hand function.
I'll probably forget to take it down now as well.
So I can do that.
Oh, wonderful! I'm hands-free hands then. So I missed the early part of the meeting. I'm so sorry, but just picking up on those points that were just made. Then, you know, in terms of the milestones, maybe it's not that critical when this project's milestones are, but it needs to be in that sort of Gantt chart context of when lots of the other national milestones are. Because I don't think you're ever going to get a perfect milestone as you know, BEIS, DEFRA, DTI, whatever change initiatives. You're never going to satisfy all of them, but putting some spikes in to say, well, we want a handle on these big events would be really good. Because from a circular economy perspective, I would have thought that perhaps less critical is a new technology coming in, and more critical is an old technology going out, because that changes the pattern of what's in the technosphere for recycling. So to use the internal combustion engine argument, how does that change our pattern of waste if those cars are now going to scrap rather than the new EVs are coming in? So, you know, there's kind of a build up as the new technology spins up, but then there's a long lag time as the old technology phases out. And, you know, what is the lag time on an ICE no longer being sold, but continuing to operate for 10, 15, 20 years? What's the footprint of that waste through a circular economy? Right. So, you know, you're never going to get a perfect milestone, but some spikes would be good.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good idea. And we'll certainly have a work over this week with the team and just see if we can maybe pull out some generic time markers like that onto the chart. It's a great suggestion. Thank you. This, as you can tell, this is going to be very iterative work. Do not feel that we've got this sorted and we know exactly what it's going to look like. We've tried to create a framework that we hope structures your discussion so it goes somewhere, but gives you a lot of scope to add things on and to create things and take some real ownership of this. Arthur,
yes, you can say Arthur, that's fine. So just following on the question by Dan, well, we set the milestones on our project, which is actually looking at what we're going to do with the ICE cars. So we're looking into retrofitting that. So how we set the milestones is actually looking at the regulations where the cars are going to be banned for use in cities and in the country and so on. So this is how we set it. So that's another way of that it's possible to look. Of course, those are actually moving as well. So what we think it's true now, it might change. And also it should be considered that maybe not fast enough as well.
Great. Okay, thank you.
I know it's just very generally, I know people are discussing ban of ICE vehicles. I thought it was ban of sale of ICE vehicles. That's quite a clear distinction. You need to make sure, because you could just take someone who's relentlessly wants to use the same ICE vehicle for the next 50 years and they'll just repair it.
I can introduce you to some people like that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be one of them. I would want to keep a vehicle running for as long as possible. Okay, but anyway, sorry, I was quickly going to mention it'd be really good to draw in some materials points for the materials, some materials milestones, some expected resource limit, like an expected limitation on the resource, say lithium or cobalt, when you were expected to get to a point where global supply and demand are going to not really match up and price point's going to become a complex issue. It might be worth getting that for the materials drive.
Okay, thank you very much. Dan, you've got your hand raised again.
Yeah, just directly to respond to that. This is something that's definitely in Evie's expertise as well. It's really difficult to do supply and demand of metals as a mined resource and put a time limit on it, because the definition of a reserve or resource as the mining industry have it is really a stronger economic entity than it is a geological entity. So we very rarely, maybe ever, run out of stuff or have a deadline for running out of stuff, because as it looks like it's dwindling, the price goes up and then you discover more. So it's incredibly difficult And any reports that do put these sort of like timeframes on things running out, they're always absolutely savaged by people within the industry. So it is really difficult. And I think perhaps the to add some nuance to what you're saying and to make it practical is to look at how perhaps the UK's consumption of things will change and where the most dramatic changes are, and therefore where it needs to diversify its sources so it's less dependent on raw material import from overseas. So, you know, as the ramp up in electric vehicles comes in, which raw materials do we need more of the most quickly, and which ones are we most subject to security of supply restrictions? So this is stuff that EMA and Evie have worked on extensively over the years, and me too, but those two in particular. And it's less about when we're going to run out and more about how do we offset the threat of geopolitics and security of supply issues, perhaps, because a lot of the geologists will tell you we'll basically never run out of stuff.
I think the issue is not so much the geology becomes far less important as you move to a more circular economy, because things stay in the system. So we're looking for quite a major change where
it does, but you are not going to be able to satisfy demand just
no, of course not.
Not of course not.
But if you're looking for a future where we essentially can't run out because we keep the things in a circular economy. I mean, that's clearly the whole thing must develop. Surely.
Okay, I'm going to pause you there. Mark's got his hand up for a question, but I'm also conscious that we've only got 3 minutes left on our advertised finish time, and some of you have got other things to go on to. So we can stay on the line and I'll take those questions. But for those of you that have to leave, you're going to get an email from Rika, so do read that, which is going to have the link to today's recording, the link to the coffee area mural, and a view-only link for the workshop, so you can really have a go and explore things using mural. Have a look at that. The work for next week is iterative, so we're going to change it and add to it over this next week. We will come back to you. I know people are questioning about whether they can have emails and know who's attending the workshop. I'm going to leave that in Rika's hands because that gets into a whole area of data protection, which just isn't my bag to deal with. And I'm just going to encourage you to book your seat. It sounds like we're going to have some really interesting discussions. So unless you want to be in the grey area, if you want to be in one of those specific discussions at the workshop next week, then I would invite you to start moving your name badge into the seat that you'd like to have, so that, because we only really want about 5 or 6 people in each small breakout group, otherwise it becomes the conversation goes on forever. But there is an option to dip in and out of different groups during the course of the workshop. So that's my stuff done. So if you have to go, you can go knowing you've not missed anything. But I will now cue in Mark, who's patiently had his hand up for a question. And because he doesn't have his video on, he hasn't been able to wildly wave to me in the screen to get my attention. So Mark, over to you.
I'm not a wild waver. No, yeah, just a thought on the metal supply. Is it worth getting someone like CRU or having access to CRU data, which tends to cover a lot of the topics that we just had a 10-minute discussion on, you know, where they do analysis on availability of different metals and what the supply and demand looks like, etc., on an annual basis. I'm not sure that's normal to do something like that in an EPSRC type project, but I certainly, from a business point of view, use CRU, you know, as reference data for a lot of these topics, especially when it comes to light metals and metals for battery.
Can I just very quickly answer that? BGS has a lot of this data as well. You know, we're funded by UKRI to actually develop mineral statistics. I'm very happy possibly to put a presentation on with some information about projections, especially for battery metals, if that's your interest, in the, I don't know where we're going to put it, Christine, but I could have some slides with some of the key metals that they're used in batteries and have projections for demand and what current supply looks like, just so that people have a bit of background information to relate to when we talk about things like that.
Yeah, that's great. I think we could put that into the mural. That will, especially in the coffee lounge area, that will entice people to make a visit there. So that's a great idea.
Actually, yeah, because I had also a presentation done lately specifically on the circular economy. So what the other thing I could do is possibly kind of put some projections about about how much the circular economy may satisfy, demand for some of these metals too. So that can also be of interest.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
Well, thank you. I think it's going to be a fantastic workshop series. So if the debate continues like this, we were thinking this would only just be a simple question answer session. So it's been really nice to have people's engagement, and that makes us quite excited about the workshop. So if you do want to hang on the line, feel free to do so. Evie, Rika, Richard and myself will just be hanging on just to briefly talk through the workshop for next week and make sure we've got all our preparation in place. But if you have any questions you want to ask us, please feel free to just hang on the line. Otherwise, feel free to go about your other duties, go and get an actual pastry from your kitchen or a piece of toast or something. And we'll look forward to seeing you next Friday if you're coming to the first workshop. If you're not coming to the first shop, don't worry, because you can go to the other ones. They will build on that work, but we've got people who are coming to all three and some people who are just going to drop in because the dates don't work for them. So we look forward to seeing you when you can. So thank you very much for your attendance. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.